Hi, this is Chris Legaspi, and in this video, we're going to do a watercolor figure sketch using graphite pencil and watercolor. And these drawings were done from a live drawing stream, so these will be time poses. It'll be 3 5-minute poses and a 15-minute pose. And if you want to follow along, all you have to do is go to drawthis.com's YouTube channel, or you can draw live every Friday night. They stream a live drawing, so definitely check them out. drawthis.com. Okay, so starting with this first pose, it's a 5-minute standing pose. And here I'm doing the gesture. It's a 2D lay-in. And if you've been following my work, you'll see I have many life drawing demonstrations on this channel here. I've covered this topic many times. So I'm going to focus more on the color and the color choices. I think that's much more interesting, at least for this video demonstration. So here, what I'm doing here is giving myself enough information really to start putting down washes of watercolor. And I'm using a very graphic approach right now. It's a very two-dimensional approach, meaning I'm using very simple shapes. Notice how the arms were just basically 2 triangles. Look at the legs. They're basically a rectangle with a few curves. So that's really the core of my philosophy. And if you want to see more of this and learn more about it, I have many videos on this channel about that. So here, what I'm doing now is fleshing out the legs. So I'm kind of going into 3D now. So I'm starting a little bit of construction. I'm not going to do too much construction because this is it's only a 5-minute pose. And I really want this to be more about the watercolor, more about the tone, and less about the drawing. So in a lot of ways, you're seeing more of a shorthand lay-in and a very, very brief bit of construction. And here I'm giving myself a little bit of detail in the head, as you can see right there. And what I'm doing now is I'm cleaning up my shapes. So I'm giving myself a little bit of anatomy, but just enough, not too much anatomy. Okay, so now I'm going to start to add my first wash, and I'm going to use a very limited palette for these. I'm going to use mostly burnt umber and ultramarine blue, and these 2 complementary colors. It's a brown, burnt umber, and a blue. It's a reddish blue. Ultramarines are reddish blue. It creates a beautiful range of gray tones. So it's going to be a very gray, desaturated type of watercolor. So not too colorful. And as you can see by this wash here, it's just a nice wash of brown. And what I'm doing is I'm going over the shadow shape. Now, normally, if I was to do this in straight pencil, I would do this step with the pencil or the charcoal. But now I'm using a wash of color, and this is a sable brush here, and it's my favorite brush, white sable, for watercolor washes. And just going along the shadow shape. Now the light is pretty good. It's not as contrasty as I like it. If you look on the reference, you can see that it is a single source, but the light, the exposure of the camera hasn't been set so that the shadows aren't too dark. They want to bring out some of the detail in the shadows for the live stream. And as you can see, it just kind of gives it a nice read. You can look at that figure and see that it does read once the shadow is there. And then you can see that the tone is dried a little bit. And the dried tone gives it a little bit more gray look. It's a very desaturated brown. That's why I added the blue. Okay, moving on to the second pose. So I started with the head again and then moving on to the torso. So when I draw the figure from life, I typically use the same process method every time. It's sort of a systematic way that I like to work. And the only difference is sometimes I start with the head, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I start with the torso. Sometimes I start with the shape, the overall shape or the envelope. Sometimes I start with the action of the pose, the thrust or the action line. It really depends on what the pose gives me. But in this case, I started with the head because I wanted good proportion. And because I'm using this kind of small sketchbook, this is a moleskin little sketchbook, and I have a little tiny space. I wanted to kind of get good proportion right away and also have it fit on my page. Playing with fire here, having it drawn on the edge. I see a lot of that in student work where they draw the drawing close to the edge of the paper, and it kind of ruins the drawing because they end up screwing up the proportions. So, I'm guilty of that too, but luckily it worked out in this case. So as you can see, just like before, it worked very 2D, very graphic, very flat. I draw shapes first, like the legs. I drew a shape, and then I started to refine the shape and add a little bit of detail. Like the head here, I drew the head as a simple graphic shape. Then adding a little bit of detail. Now, because it's so small, there's no way I'm going to be able to do a full construction and add planes and details and things like that. But I really want to, what I really want to do is just give myself enough information so I can add tone. That's really what I'm trying to do here. Just like before, these figure sketches are more about the watercolor than the line drawing itself. So here I'm defining the arm, the back arm, which most of the weight of the figure is on, at least the upper half. Definitely want to define that. And now I'm starting to define the seat, which is a box. I really love to show the ground plane or the seat. If a model is seated or reclining on the ground, I love to show the contact areas where it meets the surface of a chair or the floor. Adds a lot of weight. It's a very powerful way. When done right, it just adds weight and form and volume. It's very powerful. Now what I'm doing here is adding a little bit of detail. I don't want to go too much into detail. I'm ready to move on to the watercolor. And here we go, putting the first wash, and I'm using the exact same color as the previous pose here. And I'm going down and putting a wash where the shadow shapes are. Now, if you look at the reference, you can see that there are a lot of what I call 50-50 shadow shapes. So some of the shadow could be grouped with light. Some could be grouped with shadow, with dark shadow. And that's because of the exposure of the camera they use during the stream. Probably in person, you could see that the shadow will be much darker, but because of the camera exposure, they brighten the shadow so you can see more detail on the stream. So what I would do in this case, if you're not sure, is draw from what you know. So a lot of times, figure drawing is a great opportunity to not draw what you see, but actually to draw from what you know. So, of course, you will have to do a lot more homework, bring a lot of knowledge to the table when you come to the life drawing. But, that's just an excuse to do your studies, to do your homework, and give yourself that knowledge of anatomy and form and what's going on there. So that's what I do when I get to these 50-50 situations. Now I defined that side plane of the box, and it's really, really powerful. Look at the read. Now look how strong that the figure and the box read. You can it communicates a lot. Now you can see A, form. B, you can see what kind of form. It's a human being. And C, you can see the direction of the light. So that's how powerful thinking graphically and simplifying your shadow shapes at this early stage is. It gives you a very powerful and clear read, clarity. That's my goal in quick sketch, in short poses, is to master clarity. And that's what I'm doing here. And you can see that the watercolor has a little bit of saturation, so it looks nice, it looks warm. And now I'm going to add a little bit more color. I'm using burnt sienna here to add a little bit more warmth to the shadow, especially at the core shadow. So the core shadow is where light and shadow meet. So I'm giving myself a quick wash of slightly warmer tone at the coarse shadow, which will also darken the coarse shadow and just give my figure a little bit more saturation, a little bit more life color-wise. And as you'll see later, I'm going to go back and add even more color when the timer's finished here. So that really completes this second pose here. Pretty much my time is running out here. Okay, this last 5-minute pose is a head. So one of the cool things about the Draw This stream is that they show a close-up of the head. So I really love that about the stream. So definitely, if you want to join the stream, definitely check them out. They stream it on their Facebook page, and the stream is free. So very, very cool. I'm very grateful for them. Normally, I would be at the studio. Drawthis.com shares the same studio with New Masters Academy, which I'm an instructor for. So normally I would be there live and in person, but at this moment I was, when this was recorded, I wasn't able to come to the studio. So here, let's start with the head. Okay, so the head is very similar to the figure. Start with the gesture in the graphic. Even though it's a head, it has a gesture. In this case, the action goes from the back of the neck to the front, sort of this loopy kind of gesture. And then I really, in this case, I go straight into features because A, it's a profile, and B, because again, I want to use the watercolor to tell the story of form. I don't really need to go too much deep in the construction. Now, that's easier said than done because A, I have, the mileage and the hours, the knowledge and the experience to again, draw from what I know. I know what's going on there. So that doesn't mean you have to. If you're following along, definitely take as much time with the construction as you need. If you can't get to the watercolor wash, don't worry about it. Save that for a 20-minute pose or a 40-minute pose or an hour pose. But this is quite an advanced thing. I probably should have mentioned that in the beginning. Okay, and I'm getting ready for the color now. So this shadow shape is quite clear. Most of the face, at least in this view, is in shadow. And what I'm going to do is try to be careful to leave some of the shapes of the ear. It's a very wonderful, the small shapes of the ear will really kind of create an illusion of 3D because I'll make the ear come forward. And also help sell the illusion of form. That's really the main thing I'm doing here, is trying to be careful with the small ear shapes and light. But the big massive shadow is quite large. All the eyes are in shadow. All the side of the cheek is in shadow. So that's going to go very simply. And now moving into the little small shapes in the mouth and the nose. So as you can see by the read, it reads very, very well, even though it's just a big, graphic looking thing, because the shapes were designed so well, it reads very well. And that's, I got to give some credit to the lighting crew for providing wonderful light. So here we go. I'm putting in a wash at the light actually, and I'm using that slightly warmer tone. You can see how much warmer this looks. This has a lot of burnt sienna in it, less blue. The shadow tone has a lot of blue. And I'm just putting in a quick wash at the light because these washes are fairly light and thin. This is not the best watercolor technique. It's sort of a watercolor hack that I use. You typically don't want to go this dark this soon, but for me it's pretty light. So these washes will dry light, and I'm just going to go over it with a little bit more color to give it a little bit more value and pop. Like I said, now I go going back to the figure. So this is something I do at any life drawing, regardless if it's, especially from drawing from life, from time poses. I will kind of jump around the page, especially for these quick sketches. When you got more than one on a page, you can kind of do that. You can jump around. So I'm putting that a wash during time. And now I'm going to create a darker brown. So what I'm going to do is reinforce the shadow. And I'm going to use blue to push the shadow back. Adding ultramarine blue will make the shadow cooler, darker, and push it back into space. And that's what I want. Cools go back into space, and warm colors come forward. And I have a whole course on color, and it covers this topic in in great detail, warm and cool colors, and how to get started painting. So you definitely want to watch that. It's called The Laws of Color. You can find more information on that on my website or on this channel here. So here I'm just going over the drawings I've already did. Just having fun here. This is just me having fun and making my drawings look cool on the page. In fact, once these dry, I'll probably go back one more time, after the time is set, just to add little kicks of color. And that pretty much completes this drawing session. Okay, that's the end of this video. I want to thank you for watching. In the next video, in part 2, I'm going to do a 10-minute pose. So this one's going to be cool. You're going to see a little bit more color. I have double the time. I got 10 minutes here. So you'll be able to see me add a little bit more color. So you'll see how I'm also going to suggest the color of the light, which is going to be really interesting. And also do some quick washes to make the flesh tone come alive. So if you want to see how I handle flesh tone in watercolor, definitely check out part 2. And part 2 is going to be available exclusively to subscribers. So all you have to do to access part 2 is go to my website, www.drawwithchris.com. And there you can sign up for my free newsletter. Newsletter subscribers will get access to not only part 2, but other exclusive contents. You'll get more videos, more free lessons, and other cool stuff like handouts. I only release handouts to subscribers. I have a whole collection of handouts there. You'll get access to my private reference library and a whole lot more. And the newsletter is free. All you have to do is go to www.drawwithchris.com and enter your email, and you'll be good to go. So that's it for this video. And until next time, get out there, keep drawing, and build up that mileage. Bye for now.